Alright everyone, we start off today with Boomer Camo and Ultra Autism Juice here. White Monster, blown the fuck out basically. We need to talk about war, because what's Beijing Biden doing? Of course. It looks like we're going to be back in the Iraq War fairly soon. Right now it's NATO that's talking about things. Biden's Pentagon has signaled potential willingness to join in. In other words, to go and gang rape, a third world country for oil or whatever purpose they can dream up this time. First and foremost, though, there will be a pinned comment if you're watching on YouTube with 4 links to other video hosting sites that I use. You should definitely use Alt Tech, and Dailymotion actually is, I'm not going to lie, pretty good. Its processing power is considerably higher than it was a few years ago, to the point where actually if I start an upload there and on every other site, Dailymotion will actually process it first. I don't think it has 1080, but it definitely supports 60 frames per second. It's pretty good. I'm recording in 720 anyway, because otherwise I end up processing problems on YouTube and I can't exactly figure out what's going on. Anyway, we've currently got 500 NATO troops in Iraq. A small contingency, and that's because the Iraqi government is more Western-leaning now than it was certainly under Saddam Hussein. Things are stable-ish there for the most part. But what's happened is that NATO is very concerned that ISIS will come back. So instead of just, combating them if they come back because they've been laid waste to by everyone in the region, NATO has decided it's a better idea to preemptively pump 3,500 additional troops into the region. Now, 4,000 troops, it's not an army capable of standing against a symmetric foe, but, for counter-terrorism stuff, it's, a reasonable amount of people. And it makes people think twice about fucking with you. And the idea is prevention. I'm not entirely unsympathetic towards that idea, but as a millennial, I'll just say this. I am very, very hesitant to, in my opinion, sort of go with anything that involves Iraq. Because we invaded them already. Here's the timeline. The U.S. invades Iraq. Saddam flees. His guard crumbles immediately. Shock and awe, and bomb all the infrastructure. Then we set up shop with hundreds of thousands of people, begin rebuilding what we already bombed, only to find that because there's a power vacuum, Al-Qaeda comes in, and then we fight them for the next decade. The problem is right now, the United States is almost working with Al-Qaeda on some fronts. When ISIS was at its peak, we began negotiating with groups like the Taliban in Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and really the globalistic neoliberal policies of people like Biden are what caused ISIS in the first place. Why did ISIS become a problem? Instead of just being a regional group that was just extra murderous and, doing the same things Al-Qaeda or Al-Shabaab did, they became fairly widespread. Why? Because of Hillary Clinton's policies. Specifically because of the Clinton-Obama policy of destabilizing Libya, continuing to destabilize Iraq, and with the Syrian civil war, keeping things unstable there as well. There was an attempt in Egypt. It failed, thankfully. There was an attempt in Algeria, Tunisia actually. That failed, largely because of Facebook, by the way. People were organizing counter-protests there and on Twitter. Just hilarious, because they couldn't do that at this point. Big tech now foments, I think, fascism of various kinds. This is an escalation, though, and now you've got the Pentagon saying, under Joe Biden, the buck stops there as commander-in-chief, oh yeah, maybe we'll put more troops in Iraq. I don't know how many U.S. troops are still there. Trump drew down troops in a lot of theaters. And I don't have a problem with having a small peacekeeping detachment there. By the way, as a libertarian I'm saying this. This is a country that we are now allied with. Iraq is a Western-leaning country now. It's still got a government in its infancy. We did break all the toys. We've rebuilt, some semblance of stability there. And it is a good idea to be friendly to our friends. But when you have this kind of escalation, and NATO is prefacing this on saying, well, we don't want ISIS to come back. ISIS wouldn't be capable physically of coming anywhere if we hadn't acted in the first place. The problem is our own foreign policy created the situation that led to them becoming successful. Number 2, you're not going to accomplish that by let's look historically at what we've been doing in this region. Presumably running guns and so forth to other militant groups, like what we did in Syria. In Syria, we decided, well, Assad's at least reasonably comfy with the Iranians. The Iranians are reasonably comfy with the Russians. Ergo, they are our enemy. So we need to get rid of Bashar al-Assad. What will we do? Well, there's this rebel group called the FSA. I'm not really sure exactly what they stand for, but, you know, they don't like Assad. Well, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Let's give them some less than lethal aid. And of course, it was far more than that. We started giving them, you know, basically carte blanche. The Pentagon comes and gives them billions of dollars in weapons and armor and all of this other stuff. They get their ass kicked because Assad gets backed by the Iranians. They finally put their foot down and say enough is enough. The Russians get involved. Turkey gets involved. It could have been a World War III scenario. You could have had a Cuban Missile Crisis over the situation at its height, by the way, and nearly did when I think the Turks shot down a Russian jet at one point, and there were some big diplomatic quarrels over this. And Russia finally backed away from the table and said, okay, it was an honest mistake. You know, just say sorry, please, Erdogan. Say sorry and sign more trade deals. Yeah, we'll be your friends. We'll forgive your mistakes, unlike Uncle Sam. And then they're drawing the Turks off towards the Eastern Bloc. But what's happening in this region is nonstop warmongering, and a lot of people think that it began with 9/11. One bone I have to pick with a lot of millennials is if they haven't studied anything about diplomatic history, they don't realize we've been fucking around in the region since the 50s. Really, it's an outgrowth of the post-World War II mentality. What happened in World War II is we realized the importance of fuel. We realized that in the era of mechanized warfare, you needed a supply line for fuel, and a lot of that fuel happened to be in the Middle East. So whoever controlled the Middle East, at least through puppet states, they were the big kahunas. The British Empire began to collapse, and all of these provinces began fighting for independence and saying, fuck the British. The United States swept in and got involved on behalf of the Western Allies during the Cold War, and spent literally 4 decades doing so. That's what we see here. My problem is this. We have a Joe Biden, a Beijing Biden administration that on the one hand is at least receptive to the idea of world policing the Middle East, considering joining, you know, these 3,500 additional NATO forces in Iraq. This is just one nation there. We've got forces in Syria. We've got detachments in other parts of the Middle East and in East Africa. But at the same time, cancels Keystone XL, cancels leases in Texas, cancels leases in New Mexico for energy development, certainly in Alaska, is destroying the ability of the United States to exempt itself, at the very least for its own domestic usage, from these energy sources. We have the energy to extract in and of ourselves, as do many other countries in the world. The United States is capable of being completely energy independent. If it is capable of guaranteeing that, it is less necessary for it to constantly and perpetually occupy other countries. Again, as an allied regime, technically speaking, it's okay to have some troops in Iraq. Government's inviting them there. But when you surge thousands of additional troops there, that signals to every group that doesn't like you, hey, they're gearing up for war, they're going to bomb more things. They're going to use this country as a launching pad against Iran. Maybe against the Saudis. Maybe they'll invade Lebanon. Who knows? The problem is that these other people get nervous because they're the ones that actually fucking live there. They might be zealots. They might be completely fucking goddamn insane. Why would you want to expose your own greatest youth, your soldiers, your apple pie and ice cream and grandma in the rocking chair generation to potentially getting shot in some desert because of energy sources that you don't technically even need in and of yourself? Honestly, I think the U.S. should retool its capabilities towards guaranteeing mainly trade and travel, as opposed to this perpetual occupation bullshit. It doesn't even make sense anymore in the modern age. It's not the 1990s anymore. The geopolitical situation with regards to, well, the countries that exist, for one thing, energy resources, communication, everything has changed so dramatically since the middle of the 1990s that the same foreign policy being recycled by people like Joe Biden really no longer even makes sense. It's as stale as Joe Biden. He's still living in the 90s too. That's why the other day he was talking about black on black crime. Well, you might be right, Joe. The problem is you're a Democrat and you're not supposed to say that anymore. It's considered to be racist. So yeah, I mean, the idea of putting more troops in Iraq is just completely goddamn insane. Let's waste another $1 trillion. You know, how many trillions of dollars did we waste occupying basically a desert that we didn't need. Without those fuel resources, we just would have developed our own faster anyway. We would have become energy independent before 2015 maybe. Well, nobody's thinking of these things. They're just thinking of the grand chessboard. That's about all. Peace out.